reason Acrobat does not like me, I'm going to Google Drive. Cool. So first of all, let me say thank you to the organizers. It is, and thank you for volunteering and doing all this. Thank you guys for voting for this session. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the sponsors. So that's the housekeeping thing. So let me tell you where my story started. It starts when this place, which is a museum, which is not that far away from here, looks like this. So it was just, we were just starting to build it. We broke ground. We knew we wanted to have the most interactive museum in the world, and we had to figure out what that really meant and how we were going to make stuff that people wanted. And we were on the hook for over 30 different interactive experiences and a website, which is quite a bit. So I had finished graduate school. I was very, very broke. This is what my bank account looked like. But I went to graduate school for design, and I said to my boss, we had this game that we were supposed to love. And I'm like, we have to go to school. So we have an education department. They're willing to set us up at a school. We have to go to school. We have to test our ideas. And my boss begrudgingly agreed with me. Even though he didn't like this idea because he was a television producer and he associated these things with focus groups. And he hated focus groups, and who doesn't? I mean, I think they're kind of focus groups. So I go there and we completely crashed and burned. And I'm mortified, right? Because I have no money. I just got my first job out of graduate school, and I'm going to live in my parents' basement forever. But he's ecstatic. He's completely fired up. Because with 1.5 weeks of work, we went out to a school and we realized we got 60% of what our product was wrong. And when I thought he was going to be pissed because we got it wrong, he was happy because he didn't have to spend that much money to figure out what needed to change. And he said, get us to another school next week. And so we did. And we changed a lot of stuff. We went to the next school, another school someplace in Virginia. And then we found out we had this really awesome idea and kids loved it. We also found out that we had a market for it. Because the standards of learning in all of the major districts we serve, so the education standards, require teachers to have current events in their classrooms. But teachers were already completely overwhelmed, so they needed to find some trusted content providers who could bring current events into their classrooms. So there was a market, kids wanted it, they liked the gameplay, and we were able to figure that out within about 3 weeks' time for a fairly minimal effort. The game that came out, if you're curious, it's called Newsmania. I think it still runs today, even though today it's kind of embarrassing. Like, oh, can we just update that, please? It actually launched and was picked up and played in classrooms around the country because we really understood that market, what kids wanted, what teachers wanted, what kids wanted, and it was named one of the 50 coolest websites that year by Time. So, this prototyping thing, it kind of works. Compared to, you're seeing this in Cubicle? Right. I don't see it so much these days, but I remember definitely I've seen it in a few places. A lot of IT projects, software projects, apps, SaaS, whatever it may be, it kind of sucks. It sucks because everybody in the organization has their pet 5 requirements that they put into the PRD or RTM. If you don't know what those mean, think yourself. And it got bogged down. And so all of a sudden, we're a service provider, so that's kind of our perspective. We have us as a service provider, we're stuck giving you something we know doesn't work for you. And you're stuck accepting something for us you know doesn't work for you either. And so that's where, kind of, I think a lot of this lean, agile, and design thinking stuff came from, is how do we find out what we really need and what works for our customer? And so we said there's got to be a better way. This is not working. Customers are having 20 to 30% of their budget gone before they get to see anything. And when they realize they're heading the right direction, they cannot change direction effectively because they're stuck in some firm fixed price contract with certain requirements. So instead, why don't we try something different? If you have an idea, what does it look like? Do customers want it, and is it right for my business? These are the kind of foundational questions we set up a whole practice to answer. And prototyping is like the key and center of how we work through these things. So we need to make sure, we need to visualize it, because people have a hard time, whenever you have like a wireframe or a document, there's many ways you can interpret that. But if I can see it, if I can touch it, and I can interact with it, we'll get more common understanding around what this product needs to be. You've got to involve your customers, and you have to find something that serves your customers at the same time serving your business. So this is what our 4-week process pretty much looks like. We do rapid user research. I know there's at least 2 UX folks here, and I'm a UXer by background, but a lot of times UX research means months, lots of money, and PowerPoint to nowhere. It has that connotation. It's not necessarily fair, but it exists. So we like to do, 1 day or half a day of really rapid research, talking to users, talking to buyers, because sometimes the user and the buyer are the same people. We'll do that, and then we'll do a day of workshopping what our ideas are, and doing a various and sundry exercises like a canvas and sketching and the like. We do idea exploration, and then every single week we go to market. Every single week. Every single week we're going to market, and we're we're making changes or pivoting where we need to. And so on Mondays we plan. On Wednesdays we show the thing to the client. Depending on how, some clients are super involved and some clients don't have a lot of time for us, so it depends. And on Friday we go to market. And at the end, we really refine our prototype, and then we build a product pitch deck. A product pitch deck is a document that helps investors, either internally or externally, make a decision about what to invest. And that kind of comes from experience that I had with my former CEO. We were going to, I ran into an elevator, he said, "Oh, Jess, what are you working on?" And I showed him on my iPad the prototype that we just built. He was really excited about it. But he was also going to get a $3.9 million budget ask for this project. It was a big mother project. He was not going to make the decision with just the prototype alone. He needed the business case to support that. So we try to make sure we have the prototype validated by customers along with a solid business case. So, if you want to know a little bit, I'm going to promo FUZZ because there are 2 prototyping talks. FUZZ is talking about what we do on day 1. So if you're really interested in developing ideas and workshopping, go to FUZZ's talk, which is next. That's kind of what we do in day 1. We're going to skip over that whole part because he's going to cover it in another session. So.
Yeah, so at this point, we want to, typically with a lot of our clients, we ask the clients to actually test their idea before they come to us, but if they don't, then we work with them leveraging open source tools, surveys, A/B testing through landing pages, and as well as interviews and pitches to potential customers or internal stakeholders. So just a quick blurb about that.
Oh, so side note, this Javelin thing, if you're interested in learning, there's the Lean Startup Machine is in the area in November. I think they're looking for mentors and for participants. So if you're really interested in Lean and how to qualify customers and do customer development type activities, it's a weekend event that I think is in November. I've been a mentor before, and it's awesome.
So today's fake idea. We brainstormed a simple idea that we can collectively figure out the right prototype to build. So today's fake idea is within the last mile shipping industry space, Uber for shipping. So if we look at a typical customer in the last mile, it's typically a city dweller, urban, someone who doesn't have a car, or if it does, it's a very small car, and they purchase goods from either retailers, local shops, Craigslist, yard sales, large items, and they want a way to move those items. And typically, you would call your friends, but if you live in the city, most of your friends are probably in the same situation. No one's going to really have a Ford F-150 truck sitting around for them to haul stuff, or you go to U-Haul and rent something. So what's our problem? We want a low-cost and effective way to move the good from point A to point B, or from where you purchase it to your home, or wherever it needs to go. So the solution for Uber for shipping is the fact that let's tie customers that have a need of moving something to suppliers, the truckers that have spare time sitting around. A lot of times if you look within a city environment, you'll have multiple moving companies, and trucking companies, and a lot of times they just have spare time just sitting around. So why not leverage that, or if they're going on a route, be able to pick up a good and drop it off. So that's gonna be our problem statement, and we're gonna work together collectively to get to the ultimate prototype that we wanna build out.
So, just so you know, that is something we found on Product Hunt, so no one's gonna make $1 million off this idea.
Or you could, I mean.
Maybe you could like blow it out the water.
Space is wide open.
But assuming that this is our product, what do you need to learn? What do you need to validate in order to make sure you really have something before you make a big investment? Huh?
User need?
User need? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I guess just the realities of that need.
Do people need help shipping, moving like furniture?
Well, I guess we kind of established the two.
Yeah. It seems to me the riskiest assumption here is people are really buying large stuff where they can't ship it.
What truckers would offer spare capacity?
That's another risky.
So, do customers need to move big stuff? Do truckers have capacity?
No, which ones are going to offer
What kind
spare
of trucking
capacity?
companies? Yeah. So type of trucking companies.
No, not. Which ones will provide spare capacity?
Oh, okay.
It's a much more discreet question.
I do think the predecessor to that could be, do they have spare capacity first? But I mean, but certainly if they have it, are they willing to do that extra?
Do they have it? And will they do it? And is it a moneymaker for them, right?
Do they care enough?
Do they care?
Because are they just hourly employees and, right?
But yeah, we've been talking about the trucker. That's a discrete set of people. Who's the harder get in this case?
Are people willing to actually pay for this?
That's a very good question.
And then how much?
Yeah, because if you just found like a cheap like couch on Craigslist for $20, but it's gonna cost you $100 to move it, then, you know, what's the point?
Or you certainly have to be lower than the van that you can get from U-Haul.
Yep.
Or Home Depot?
How quickly can the truck be acquired? Schedule.
How quickly can the truck be acquired, or what is I might flip the question.
Yeah. Go
Flip the
ahead.
question to the customer side.
How quickly can I get it? How long is this whole process going to take me?
Yeah.
How much
Is
is
it
the
fast?
time window I'm willing to accept?
Can I push a button and have a quote and
The flip
schedule
side.
time of
The
availability?
flip side of that, since you're mentioning yard sales or Craigslist, is how long is the tolerant for the seller to rid themselves of the item. You're doing a yard sale, a lot of times the stuff immediately after the yard sale goes straight to Goodwill or something, because they really don't want it, but they first want to try to make money.
What about the type of experience you want to provide? What do you need to learn about the type of experience? Because we've been kind of transactional, but are there aspects of this that speak to the type of experience, the type of emotion? So take it one level, you've been pretty rational, get emotional.
What level of customer service?
Can I trust that they'll get my stuff from point A to point B safely?
Yeah.
Without breaking my couch or, you know, the desk that I just bought or whatever.
What will inspire trust? What will help with that trust? Because it could be, this could be your
Tracking, something like
grandmother's,
that, right?
yeah.
Like being able to see exactly where your product is.
How much tracking do we need?
One with trust, I don't mean transactionally, but what insurance do I receive? Particularly since if I'm buying a couch, it's going into my house. I'm having strangers enter my home.
Anything else you guys want to learn?
Cleanliness, I mean, because the thing is, some truckers might not always have the cleanest cabins where they, you know, and you don't want your nice vanity couch.
Is there any way to make the customer feel comfortable with this whole transaction? I mean,
That's a really good,
that we're
you
doing,
know.
right? I mean, all of that kind of, everything we're saying, I would never do this.
I think that's, and so sometimes you're looking for a very discrete set of questions. And sometimes, especially when you're prototyping, you actually want to leave the questions a little open, because you're gonna get most of them wrong. And if you have really narrowly focused questions, when you get something wrong, and you will, those more broader focused questions are gonna help you figure out what your next move is. So if you have very discrete questions, they're gonna be yes or no answers. If you can leave it a little open, that's when you're likely to see the pattern that's going to emerge is going to give you plan your next move. And it may take you in a very different direction. So typically, in this case, we need to figure out what we need to learn. Now, we've done some of this already because we did a survey or we did some interviews, but we want to take it a level deeper. The next thing we have to do is figure out what we're going to do with our prototype. So this is the way I do it with clients all the time. I draw these three on a whiteboard or someplace else. And we try to understand, look at the prototype from three directions. Now, you asked for fidelity, so it's right there. So fidelity speaks to the visual presentation. How much color? How nice does the iconography or the typography need to be? How nice do your visuals need to be in order to convey your message? Functionality speaks to how many functions and features and the depth that we need to show. And then content and data is effectively how much of that do we need to have. So what do we need to show here? So fidelity. Someone take a stab at it. How much fidelity do we need to put this in front of a customer, like ourselves?
It depends internal versus, if you're taking it to people outside the company, lower fidelity internally just to get down where things go and how things work.
Yep.
And outside company, you want it a bit higher.
So we can assume
give
that
me a
this is going
spot.
outside, because ultimately, we want to make sure that this is a good idea that we can actually go to market, eventually can actually go to market.
Is it here? Do people agree with that? Or do we need to be over here?
Lower.
Lower? What kind of visual do you think we're looking for? If you had to describe what you think it might look like, what would you say?
Like a balsamic? Is that what you mean?
Balsamic? So balsamic would be black and white,
Sketchy.
sketchy.
It looks like we can get input on it.
Yep. I'm sorry, say that again?
So it looks like we can get input without worrying about.
Yep. It's shapeable.
What about color? To add some depth.
Maybe color the links, put the blue in there for links, just show where there's some interactivity, perhaps give some hints at what's clickable.
Anyone have a contrary opinion to this?
I mean,
I think it
so,
depends on
go ahead.
I think it depends on the audience, because I've worked with some clients that they just can't look at very low fidelity sketches of wireframes and get a concept down, it becomes counterproductive to the process, so
Yep.
sometimes you have to pick it up a notch or two.
Another thing
You
is,
and then you.
another thing is educating the customer on how, well, this may be a mock-up or a wireframe thing, but the real thing is gonna look a little differently, and trying to walk them through that explanation.
Hugely important, and we're gonna get to that.
I mean, I'm thinking that we want it to be higher fidelity in this case. I mean, I'm having just my own personal, I have a lot of discomfort with this whole idea, right?
Yeah.
And
It's
if
not a
I,
real idea yet.
right, so if I'm
But if
trying,
you're having discomfort and it's not even a real idea yet, we obviously need to deal with that.
right, so I wanna see how is this actually going to work? That I'm gonna be, in developing this, I'm gonna have a market, and how is this whole experience gonna work? So I want something that's a little bit higher fidelity, so I can, feel like it's Uber for,
Sure.
right?
Yep. What about,
That makes sense.
yeah. So I would say when I do this with clients, I want to take you as far down this path as I need to, so you're not distracted. So with some of my clients, they need this high level of fidelity. I had an information security client, low fidelity all the way, because they didn't care. They really were focused on other things. I have a client in wearables. We started out low fidelity, then we had to go high fidelity because of their customer and who they were selling to. So you do have to understand your audience, and you take it only as far as you need to, so you can have a meaningful conversation and know more. So what about functionality? How much functionality do we need? How many, is it 3 features with a lot of depth and we have to go through a lot of steps? What do you think? Where'd you place it?
So the more,
What's-
the closer that your minimally viable product is to end-to-end realization, regardless of the fidelity of the interface or whatnot, the better a conversation you can have.
Yeah, so you might have to start here, but you might have to get here before you go to investors, right? So we might have to migrate the fidelity. But what's our basic starting point for functionality?
I was meaning functionality.
Functionality, yeah, in some cases, yeah, you might start here,
I
and your
might
last
have a
one-
very low fidelity looking thing.
Yep.
They may have like no icons or anything.
Yep.
But I might want, but the closer I get to end-to-end
Mhm.
working software, the better off I will be.
But what, yeah, I agree with that, and we do that sometimes. Because we do these all in HTML, so we just swap out the CSS, it's no big deal. What about functionality? How much functionality do we need to show?
There's to be a minimal amount of functionality that at least demonstrate the concept where you don't have to explain it with a whole bunch of words. They should be able to just click, 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 and get the idea.
I agree, how much is that? In this
Sometimes, well, like in this case, the thing is, they need to be able to see the truck, get the stuff, and deliver it from point to point. So I mean, it could be something like a video. It could be something like, you know, showing them that you click on this thing, store, and then connect it.
I mean, I would go lower than that. I mean, all you really need to do is say destination where you want it picked up, maybe a destination where you want it delivered, maybe it's a field where you just enter it in, so I would say pretty low. And then set up a time that's available for it.
You just want pickup, drop off, and maybe
Availability time to,
available.
yeah, and a quote, like, just keep it bare bones.
How much content do we need? How much content or data do we need to showcase?
Can I ask a quick question, because I'm not understanding the difference. Are we now just trying to validate the market need, or are we actually, now we understand the market need and we are trying to prove that we can build it?
We are trying to validate the market need.
Okay, all right, then I would agree that we could be low. Non-working would be.
Okay, what about how much content do we need?
Fairly low amount, just enough content to actually show what the, like, interface would be.
Yeah, you just need to show these basics, you need the content of these basics trainers.
Mock-up.
That would make you more reasonable than almost any client I have, second. Because when you first pull this out, you know what they all say?
Question on the content data. To what extent do your customers say, if you don't show it to me, prove to me you can have that data?
What I would say is, we haven't proven that we need that data yet. And so I would speak to more historical examples of all the data we've handled for all of our other clients. We have clients who do student records, we have clients who manage analytics portals. But until you know you need that data, I would say
Well,
that's a
first I know I
secondary.
need to know that there's a truck.
Yeah.
How can you prove to me that you have the ability to get that information, that data? Is that a functional requirement or is that a content data requirement?
I would say that's a problem, that's what you have, once you know you have an idea that's been validated in the marketplace. And we've only done base level, I'm picking on you a little bit.
No, that's okay, and that's why I'm asking.
But for the most part, what I would say, and when we have those types of questions and the qualifying customers, we would speak to our previous experience that showed all the things we've done that are like this, that have our technical chops. Secondarily, I have an R&D team who I would have focused on the technological problems, while I'm focusing on the product strategy and customer problems. So to me, they're separate items.
You mentioned that, in that last statement, you mentioned that this is one of the things that you would do when qualifying customers. So does this mean that while you're talking with the customers and having this conversation, you're still trying to decide whether or not you want to actually work on the project with them?
I'm sorry, when I said qualifying customer, I was talking about my customer's customer. So with my clients, I would normally pull this out fairly early on in the sales process to say, okay, what are we dealing with here? How much do we need to look at this? And based upon this, I'm gonna try and move you around.
Okay.
So if you're wanting to go functionality heavy, but you have to come in with a lot of user functions, I might suggest, if you really care about the functionality, let me have our labs team, our R&D team, focus on the technology part, but we focus on validating with the customer. So really let the customer help us drive this process. You'll notice that I drew it When I do these, I always draw where the markers are and then try to describe what they are and what we need. And then we have a picture of this. So we both can hold hands on where we're at least starting in this process. So we've set those expectations at the very beginning.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you talk about fidelity, etc., do you find that people are more willing to provide input when you're starting at the low end, so that they basically know that nothing's set in stone, and that they feel like they can influence the product? Where I found before, when you go too high fidelity, they tend to have an emotional reaction, which is like, this is completely wrong, right? And just
Or they love it so much that they don't realize that the customer need's not there.
yes, exactly, yeah. Either way, you kind
I've
of don't know
seen
what's
it go
going
a
on.
few different ways. I've seen people who are completely distracted by that. But most of my day-to-day context, it removes the distraction. I don't want to talk about what shade of blue this is. That is not the conversation to have. The shade of blue it is a very concrete thing in a very abstract and murky and messy world. It's very easy to comment on the shade of blue or the type of stroke you have on a button or those other things, that everybody can have an opinion on that easily. Dealing with these core things around making sure you have a problem customer solution fit, that's hard. So if you take out the easy part, we can focus on the hard part, which is why I like to start at low fidelity. But in some cases, I know I have to get, maybe with my day-to-day contact I can stay low, but I know I have to go high fidelity at some point before I go to the executive team. But I would say that is the conventional wisdom within the user experience world. The more shapeable something looks like, the more people are willing to react to it. I don't know that I've seen that happen in these cases. And it has a lot to do with who you're putting this in front of. If I put this in front of a marketing manager at a large organization, they're going to expect something very different than an engineer. We were working on a product recently that was targeted towards engineering leads and engineers. Okay, so it's very different. One thing I'm going to skip over this, you mentioned it earlier about the risk that you have to manage. So before we start this process, what we always say is, you're going to see things really fast, and that's great, but it's going to be low fidelity. We can bring ideas to life very quickly, but we need people to work with us. And most importantly, you're going to get customer feedback that you don't want to hear. Some people are in love with their ideas, and they're not necessarily used to having them get trampled all over. Ultimately, we get to the right place, but you need to prepare them for this process, particularly if they're business folks. This is new to them, and you need to get them ready. And if you don't, then we're not going to be able to really deliver on this. You have to be constantly setting and managing expectations with the folks inside the organization.
Let's go back to fidelity. What about accuracy of the results, though? I know we talked about what's the minimum you need to test the product idea, but how accurate are the results that you get from it? If you have that information, sure. Are you going to get better results from testing a higher fidelity
No,
product? Okay.
I have never seen a correlation at all. If the higher fidelity there is something called the aesthetic effect, where the higher aesthetic higher aesthetic value something has, people perceive it has a better value overall, quality overall. But I think with the type of questions we ask, we can really mitigate that really easily.
So I know we're running out of time here, but we wanted to kind of jump through and collectively figure out what should we prototype? So if we look at the system, Uber for shipping, probably maybe have three major systems. The front end, or the consumer side, where customers go in and put in the pickup and the drop off, get quotes, get delivery times, tracking. You have probably a middle tier system, which is your dispatch system, that allows you to coordinate between the customer and the trucker, and probably a system for the truckers itself, maybe a mobile app or whatever it is. So for the sake of time, what if we just start with the consumer facing? So from consumer facing perspective, what is maybe the 4 features that we would need?
A way to search for a trucker that's available.
Trucker nearby.
Is that,
Do you need to search or?
No, I want to tell where I'm
or
picking
should
up
the system
to
do
where
it?
I want it to drop off at what time.
So pickup location,
Scheduling.
You know what? I don't know this.
and there's
Yeah.
So pickup location, drop-off location, which includes time,
I do that when I get a
Point-
quote.
Then price.
and probably something about the actual product that you're shipping.
Yes,
So
size of
size and weight,
And the point of contact at the pickup end. You might have
and
to do some,
drop-off.
they might have to do coordination.
So pick up, drop off item,
So size and weight.
Isn't it like,
Contact
what's the
info.
minimum stuff that they need before they make a decision, right?
yeah,
Like,
I'm
it
gonna
might-
challenge the contact info.
Yeah.
We don't need the contact info, just like I would never prototype if I was trying to validate a login or a checkout. I definitely, you can use prototyping and use it incredibly effectively, and we do. We're trying to make sure features really work. We wanna A/B something or multivariate, but if you're doing this kind of prototyping, skip over all the transactional stuff that every other app has. Don't waste your time there. Focus on the stuff that's really unique and that's really going to differentiate your product in the marketplace that you really need to learn for your customers.
Yeah, so the key parts of your customer journey, you want to really get that customer through from beginning to end. And can you get them in a fast way, efficient way, something that really doesn't raise too many questions?
I might add alerts because there's a trust issue.
So in a way, what you're saying is implement the features that will be kind of like the killer app features that'll convert on the fastest.
Yeah.
Those are the most,
Because
usually.
you want to validate this idea, right, against real customers, but you want to do it in the most minimal, cost-effective way possible, which is, you know, you could do this on paper if you want to, then you just have to manually go up from customer to customer.
Yeah. Later on, I'll go back through, we'll design your registration system and your payment system. And we can use prototyping to make sure that those are really easy, but I don't need to do them now.
Yeah, and at the end, we'll talk about how we, you know, once this is done, how do we accelerate that product development?
Are you still deciding right now whether this is even a valid concept, right? So
Yep.
is there other things going on at this time to define like whether there's even a valid price point here, right? Like a meaningful price point where like you might.
That's an
That's-
important
yep.
point.
Price point, you can actually you could definitely include pricing in here and kind of guess at what that pricing might be.
You can research slides it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
see where you end up on your A/B
Cause
testing.
you might just throw it out then, because like you said, like someone, if it's $100 minimum, you might, people might.
If my couch costs $20 or my couch is free and it costs me $100 to use it, to move it, but yeah, you can definitely you can definitely get into pricing, but you have more time for the conversation because you're not talking about things like login, checkout. I would say alerts because we know we have this underlying trust and comfort issue. So if you don't speak to that in some way and try to solve for that in your prototype, I think you're in trouble.
The window of delivery, like when can we expect it? And, because I'm thinking from the,
Estimated times.
right, from the
Yeah.
driver perspective, they might be able to create a set of pickups instead of, kind of bring down the cost.
Do you do a single point to point or a
Perhaps
continuous
you can-
chain?
They can be hit with a series of
Yeah.
And then you can start to understand what the appetite is for that delivery window. Is it like the cable company or
Right,
is it like Uber?
right.
Gentleman in the back.
Maybe to add on to that is once you add the pickup, location, size of truck, it'll give you options of the different companies that they can set you in their ETAs so that you could go with a different company with more trust, but a little bit of a higher price.
I like
So
that
it
idea. I
was-
wouldn't do that in the first round. Because it's just a little more, I think that second round to really narrow it in. But first round, fundamental, I would put that in a second, I would put that into the second bucket of testing. I do want to try and jump ahead a little bit. So do's and don'ts, and we kind of covered over them. You want to focus on the most risky and hard to prove out assumptions. You should set a schedule for how you're going to do this, and all of the teams in my practice that do this run on a very tight schedule, and I make sure I have enough of their time in order to do this effectively. And the rest, we'll put these slides up as soon as we're done, because it's already on Google Drive. So how do you test? Who are you going to test with, and how are you going to find them? So over a course of a 4-week engagement, we will test 3 times with at least 5 people each week, so that's 15 people you got to go by. So who do we want to test for this particular engagement? Where can we go? What can we do to find people, real potential customers?
Dorms.
Dorms? Oh, that's a good one. I didn't even think of that one. That'll tell you your price point right away.
Go to the yard sales you think people are attending.
Yard sales.
Or Craigslist, flea markets.
Auctions.
Yeah. What if it's a B2B player? How do you, and we've been, who's in B2B? Okay. So the consumers are usually easier in my experience. Businesses are harder. So what do you think are some of the recruiting techniques you would use for B2B?
So imagine like small mom and pop shops that may want to ship back and forth between them. They maybe they want to move goods that they've sold from one business out to the other. So how would you find those?
People we already have relationships
eBay
with.
partners.
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce, is it?
LinkedIn, groups,
LinkedIn.
small business owner
Yep,
groups.
I would definitely hit those.
eBay sellers.
eBay sellers. This is good stuff. So you definitely, in your schedule, in your plan, you have to be thinking ahead to schedule these. So that's why I like to do them on Fridays, because I know I'm gonna have Friday, and I can start scheduling people in advance, because it actually takes a lot of time, and inevitably somebody's gonna drop out. So you actually have to spend a lot of time thinking about who you're gonna test with. And then when you actually go to test, what we typically do is, we call in UX like a mediated test, so it's a one-on-one. And if we have a longer engagement, we may actually, we would, send somebody a link, allow them to experience on their own, track what they do, and then have a conversation afterwards. So, immediately, oh my gosh, it's gone so fast. Immediately, we do a lot of one-on-one testing, but you have to plan for that in advance, and you have to schedule that in advance, or else you're not gonna get to it. And that means you're missing that feedback. One last thing we want to cover.
Yeah, so we just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about, so we've gone through the validation, let's just say, you're able to successfully sell it, secure the funds for it. Now, you've gone through all that exercise, how do you accelerate your development and your product development? And this is something that we use, that we've tested out over the last couple of years, and this allows us to align all our teams, right, from analysis, design, testing, development, DevOps, and our objective within the first 4 weeks, right after that point, is to get real user stories completed by the time you get to this point. And in order for us to do this, there's a lot of work that we have to do to get that engine warmed up and really get that engine going, so that by the time we're done with, at the end of 4 weeks, as we go into sprint 2, the cycle's already running and everything's automated. We've aligned all the different parts that are needed. So at the beginning, we're starting with the assumption that all we know is the output of this, of the validated idea, the strategy that's been
This is
created.
speaking specifically to your question.
Yeah, so we don't know all the requirements, we don't know all the ins and outs, we don't know what technology we're gonna use. So within the first week, as we kick off, we start with a very intense story brainstorming session. And in this, we get the entire team to get together, because we work in a very collaborative environment. And as a collective team, we hash out every single story possible. We don't have to worry about like all the low-level details of all the features and acceptance criteria, but at least the high-level points, so that we can start understanding what our release plan is going to look like, and what's going to be our first what's going to be the definition of our first release that we're going to go to market with. So once we're done with that, we go through affinity estimation, and all that is really t-shirt sizing of the stories, and we just lay it out across a long wall, and we start taking the stories, throw them up on the wall from small to large, and basically get development involved, and have them just look at the stories in relationship with other stories, and really try to say, is it small effort, medium effort, or large effort? And then we try to apply a pointing system to it, and then from there, we're able to derive our release plan from it.
As a developer, what would you want me to take home as far as like at the end of week 1? What would be like my deliverable as far as like in your mind that you're trying to?
So at the end of week 1 for developers, really not much except start getting ready for week 2. Really start thinking about, collectively if you understood what the problem is, what is the product that we're trying to build, right? It may be mobile, it may be responsive web, there's some backend, maybe some API gateways, some architecture work that needs to be done. Really start thinking about this, so by the time we get to week 2, we want to answer any of the questions that were raised from week 1, but really start the technology architecture strategy, our data modeling strategy, or our UX strategy, refine our release plan that we've created based off the assumption, the rough order of magnitude we've created, and really start prepping for sprint one, which is going to happen, and as well as UX is already starting to think about wireframing and all the strategies around there, align against the release plan that we've created. And as we get into the kickoff for sprint one, we're getting ready to establish our rituals of our agile methodology, and really goal is development test of stories as fast as possible. Because at the end of the day, we've noticed that you could spend weeks talking about architecture, different tools to use, and ultimately, a lot of times that ends up being not necessarily waste, but it doesn't allow you to get to something tangible.
Right.
And our goal is to get to something tangible so that UX and usability testing can come in right at the end of that and go back against what we had done during the prototype stage and the assumptions that we had created, so that we can start refining our product definition as we're going along, and so that we can get to the market as fast as possible.
And so really the reason why we do, there are two reasons why we do this. One is there's always a gap. So a lot of folks have been standing up, the organizations, like Capital One, Nordstrom, Marriott, they have these labs functions, right, that do all this fun prototyping stuff. Those things are having a hard time getting to market. So we had to design our system to close the gap very quickly. We're validated, now we're gonna bring on the rest of the team, because it's probably only 2 or 3. Because all you need is 3. And if you're really good, you can do it with 2 people for 4 weeks. Then we need to bring on the rest of the team and spool them up so we can make that investment to what you're speaking of. So there has to be a way of coming out of the what's the criteria for validation, and then how do we put this thing into development so we can go to market. And that gap is a big problem. The second reason is that, a lot of is for when we're just doing what we call an accelerate, which is when a customer has done their own validation and they want to go to market, we need to get them up and running fast, which means we've already finished our first sprint in 4 weeks. We know that we all know that some portion of that's not going to be the highest velocity sprint. We also know a lot of that's going to get reworked, but we're getting the team up to speed, working together, and learning excessively quickly.
And one of the things that we've definitely seen is that we want development, as well as QA and architecture, right on day one, as opposed to having product managers go through the analysis and writing stories and getting all that data going, and then bring in architecture and start really thinking about technology, and then think about developers at the end. Really, developers should be along with the product managers. If you have a development team of 10 developers, I'm not saying all 10 developers, but at least the leads of the different modules or sections that they're building out, so that they get a real-time understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yes, because that's annoying when you bring us in.
Sweet, you're absolutely right.
Week 3, and it's like, oh, we need it week 4 to get it done, and well, you're going to be sleeping here to get it done.
Yeah. So our approach is that we're trying to move away from kind of the traditional product management model, which is really like product management, but really get back to the open world, the collaborative environment. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of times teams are dispersed, right? Everyone, I'm sure most people here don't have teams sitting right next to them. And the most efficient way to get those teams up and running is give them as much time as that they need, so that they can understand the problem that they should solve. And we should really empower the team to really think like product managers, really think about the product, and ultimately who is going to use the product, which is the customer, and the problem the customer has. Because that's what's most important.
I want everybody in our team, they are on the hook for business outcomes, because it's ridiculous to have a project with 20 people on it, and only one person, the product manager, is on the hook for whether this drives the business outcomes. That's ridiculous. Everybody needs to get in the boat and be accountable for making this project successful. And that's kind of and this is the mindset of everybody's job to drive the business outcomes of the project. It's not just the business owners. So, any other questions? We'll be around. I realize we went through the longest, the 45-minute conversation. Like I said, we've been on a 10-month journey here, really experimenting in this. We're learning more every day, and we love to talk about it. So, thank you for coming, and we'll be here.
Thank you.